Welcome in, Falcons fans. Your boy Bryce Lewis back at it again for more Atlanta Falcons content. And as the offseason rolls on, the coverage rolls on too. And on today's episode, we have SI Atlanta Falcons reporter. You've seen him across socials, articles have gone viral. Daniel Flick. What's up, man? How are you doing today?
Bryce, how you doing, man? That was something. I appreciate that. I feel like I've been hyped up a little bit, but always glad to hop back on with you, man. I think this is off season number 3 for me now coming on with you. So
yeah,
glad to keep that train rolling.
Yeah, definitely, man. It's been great being able to just kind of, keep up through the years. The end of the last year, the Arthur Smith regime, going into the Raheem Morris, and now we're in 2 years here of Raheem Morris. So we've been through the cycles. We've been through the cycles a little bit.
100%, and I think there's a lot to talk about now. Probably more than last year. I think last year was a lot of QB talk around this time. So
I mean, yeah. But I mean, it's like, oh, we got Kirk, we got Penix. It's more drama. Why did they take two guys? Then so but obviously
the conversation topic has for sure moved a little bit, but the quality of topics to talk about remains pretty prevalent. So
yes,
I'm excited about it.
Absolutely, man. We're going to talk about all that today, man. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. So you've been at OTAs, last one that you guys had the open availability for the media to go to. Just overall, is there any, obviously it's OTA, so nothing crazy, but anything that you took away from talking to Raheem, talking to the guys, seeing the guys on the field, anything of that nature?
I think the one thing about Atlanta's roster I keep coming back to offensively, there's so much carryover from last year. And the one thing a lot of players have talked about is just you have all that chemistry, you have all that talent. There's a real anticipation there that 2025 is kind of the year that it all can come together and mesh and produce at the clip. I think Bajan mentioned on Monday that him and Zach Robinson joke about how they finished 6th in total offense last year and how that to them still isn't enough. Mm-hmm. So they have a very high bar that's been set. And it is kind of interesting watching it because you have one side of the ball that is just completely new, brand new scheme, ton of new faces. And then you watch the offense operate and it's oh yeah, that guy's back, that guy's back, that guy's it's amazing. I talked to Chris Lindstrom one day and he mentioned that their whole offensive line is back. You know what I mean? Even if you put in Ryan, it's interesting with Newsel because he played 8 games last year, right? He was the guy for 8.5 games. They have continuity up front. They have all their pass catchers back. They have their quarterback back, running back back, top 2 running backs back. Their offense feels like it's drifting toward a breakthrough. And it's interesting because you look at what Jeff Ulbrich has, and you look at the tools that he has, and you can kind of see the vision starting to formulate now, but it's still just a vision, and it's still just pieces trying to fit. And so it's interesting to me because you compare and contrast the two. Atlanta's offense, it's just this unit, there's so few question marks around it, and it's got a real chance to be really good, and they're really confident that it can actually live up to that. So that's kind of been the main takeaway I've had so far. It's obviously, pads aren't on yet, but you look at the offense, the cohesion that's there, the belief that they have, the talent that they have. I feel like this offense has a chance to be really, really good.
Yeah, I think that's the hope. I mean, I saw Bijan saying he wants to take a Saquon type of jump. Like I said, Lindstrom saying they want to be the best offense in the league. So they clearly have a lot of high expectations on that side of the ball to just be able to take that next step and be able to become one of the best offenses in the league this coming season. And, we've heard Zach Robinson's also going to expand the playbook more. They feel like they can just span more with just a second year in the system and along with Michael Penix as well, which I guess if there is one of the bigger questions, it is Michael Penix from a perspective of how good should we expect him to be in his first full year as a starter, but his second year in the league. What have you through conversations with coaches, what they've said about him, how everything's been going with Michael Penix so far?
Yeah, it's been good. He's so well wired to be a quarterback one. That's the one thing about it. you talk to people, and it's been a running joke for a long time with, QBs here about like, why aren't they talking about his arm? I think with Penix, it's actually a good thing that people aren't talking about his arm when they talk about why he'll be good, because his arm is the one thing that I don't think people need to harp on at all. I think you could bring in the most, non-ball knowing individual to watch him throw and say, oh, wow, he can sling it, right? What's going to make or break him is from here up, right? And with Penix, everybody just raves about how well he prepares, about how much aura he has. I guess that's the phrase word that's flying around. He carries himself very well, as in he's not overly loud. He's kind of a soft-spoken guy, but when he speaks, a lot of people listen. He has command. It's been cool for me to be able to watch him grow in the offense. And just like last year, early on, you could see he wasn't really progressing through his like reads that much. It was a lot of like 1 or 2 reads and throw. And then you could start to see the progression towards like the end of camp last year where he was clicking them off. And it's just neat to see him to where he's now at like a very high level understanding of the offense, of where his guys are, of where the ball should be going. The accuracy is still a bit on and off with him. I mean, his common misses are high and outside, and there's still been a few of those. I don't know if that's something he'll just always have to, like if that's just a thing he'll always have, but that's still there. He's been pretty good in the team portion so far. They just started that with OTAs, but again, a guy who's still young. It's funny because you draft him and you're like, oh, he's 24 years old. Age-wise, he is, he's not like young, but he's still trying to learn the pro game. He's still trying to acclimate. He's still trying to adjust to being the guy. But I think if you look at how he handles everything, how he's mentally wired, he's so well fit for it. And his arm is as strong as ever. I can tell you that. I thought I was going to get hit by one of his passes a few days ago, and that wouldn't have been good. But I think he's been good. And the consensus from everybody around him, whether it's Zach Robinson, TJ Yates, they have a whole QB staff around him that's really good. Raheem's very high on him. There's an idea out there now that he's finding his voice. He's becoming comfortable in this role. He's been throwing with a lot of his top guys this offseason already, which is something he mentioned he wanted to do back in January. So, it's still going to be a bit of a we'll see it when it happens. I think you got to wait until, it's actually like live action pads come on. But for a guy who's out there slinging the rock around and, a helmet and shorts, he's looked pretty good.
Yeah, too. And I know that they made the announcement yesterday they're going to have joint practices back in Valley Branch, I think, for the first time in a couple of years, which I think is good. Obviously, those are, again, assuming Raheem goes the same approach as last year and not playing his starters in the preseason. Can't wait for that to be a discussion. That will be what they would say his time to kind of play against another team's ones and kind of see how he does in that role. So it'll be interesting to see his progress, especially going to mini camp, then into training camp. So let's go over to the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, like you mentioned, a lot of new talent, young talent, new team, new defensive coordinator. But I think there's also a lot of optimism. Getting Jalen Walker, getting James Pierce Jr., you added, Floyd, Fox is another guy that I think is a very underrated name. Divine, just different guys, and then along with some of the guys from returning like Jesse Bates and AJ Terrell. It feels like this defense is kind of establishing something where it feels like they want to obviously get after the passer. That's why they aggressively addressed it this offseason. Yeah. But also having guys who can make plays on the back end. What has Jeff been telling you about how the defense is coming along so far, just even through just OTAs and everything?
Yeah, he likes it. It's interesting. There's one thing that he said that stands out to me in that regard, and it was draft weekend. So this is prior to all the outside stuff happening with him. But he had mentioned that his first day, so Atlanta had started off-season program, I think April 22nd. And so Jeff talked to us for the first time after that on day 3 of the draft. They had just taken who they taken round 4?
Billy Bowman.
Billy Bowman, yes, and he said his head was spinning after that because he did not think he'd be on the board, and so, but he had mentioned later in that he had just in his very first few practices, meetings, just the time that he got to spend around the guys early on, he was just highly impressed just with character, with commitment, with just passion, attention. Like he was very impressed with the group, and with him, he's talked a lot about creativity and a lot about plans. And the plan that I'm seeing here now, they're slow playing, Pierce and Walker and Watts. The whole rookie class has kind of not been incorporated yet as far as like if it's ones against ones, they're probably not out there, at least not early on in that part of it. But it's been kind of neat because like I actually put this in a piece I wrote on Monday. For as much expectation as one could have for a unit that has so many new faces, whole new scheme, whole new play call, all the new, what they're showing is actually exactly what you could kind of expect as far as who's where, who's in what role. When you think about like Floyd, right? This is a guy who's going into, I think, year 10 in the league. He's seen a lot of ball, played at a high level. Even though he's only about 3 months in now, here he's already kind of, reached a point where he's a well-respected voice. He's like taking guys kind of like, Pierce and Walker and he's trying to be that, piece and that guy who can show them what it looks like. It's the exact same thing with Fox. Raheem had mentioned at league meetings that that's a guy whose voice just is so well respected around the league. It's neat because they have a good blend, especially up there, that whole front seven really, and then you kind of have Jesse, AJ out back too. There's veteran leaders at each level in that unit, which is good when you draft guys or you sign guys at each level who you expect will play key roles at each spot on each level. And so there's an expectation there that you have guys who know what it should look like. And I think it was AJ mentioned Monday that the progression from their roster from the last few years of Quinn, when it was a lot of guys who had reached the playoffs, who had won a lot, and then it kind of transitioned over. They had to completely remake the roster in 2021, cap stricken and everything. And I think AJ is now the longest tenured guy on that side of the ball. It's him and Jake Matthews are, I think, the only two who are back. And I think AJ mentioned on Monday that, like, when they had that transition, they lost guys who knew what it took to, reach great playoff heights. And so they're trying to build back to that. And you kind of think about who they've brought in, the guys who are taking on larger, louder presences in that room. It's guys who have won. And so it's interesting when you kind of look at that, when you're trying to, see where all the parts fit. The one constant you can see and the one thing that you feel really good about if you're Atlanta is that you have so many good voices in there who can, at least for a unit that's got a really interesting mixture of guys who have played for a long time and guys who really haven't played at all, right? Like you're looking at a team that could probably start 3 rookies and is going to be looking for about 2 or 3 guys from last year's class who haven't played much to also play pretty heavy roles this year. There's a blend there, and there's a veteran presence there that I think will help them out quite a bit.
Yeah, I think when you have, like I said, such that mixture, it's very important those voices do stand out because they're really relying on them along with Jeff to kind of help those guys come along because they know we're going to need them this year. And I think that's obviously a big part of that as well. Obviously, the D-line, obviously, like we mentioned, is going through some shifts. I think they're moving Zach Harrison back out. I think he's going to kind of play a bit of a big edge type of positional role. I think with Dorless moving out there. I don't know if Nate Ollie's talked during the OTAs in camp. I know he talked a little bit after the draft, but what has he been saying just about how things are going with the guys, some of them maybe being in new positions? I know you said the rookies are kind of being slow walked, but the other guys who maybe are more in the rotation and people have expectations for this year.
Yeah, Ollie had mentioned to me, because I actually had said to him a few weeks ago, it's kind of cool. that room kind of embodies that whole unit. Like there's such an interesting mix there. And there's a lot of young guys there who they think are ready for that step. Ollie had mentioned to me that he liked Rukarororo quite a bit coming out of Clemson in 2024. Obviously, Atlanta traded up and drafted him in round 2. But Ollie's been fond of Rook for a long time now. And, there's a bit of an expectation now, Rook, and, it's Rook's expected to take that step and become a guy. I think with, that unit needs a guy like him to take a step. Zach Harrison's expected to kind of take that step as well. I think Floyd had mentioned last week that he wants Zach to become a louder voice, kind of become more of a, presence off field, because he's a high character individual, highly respected. He's just still trying to kind of find himself, I think, as a pro. He kind of came on a bit, late last year as well. I think with Zach Harrison, the question is not talent, it's when it comes together and when he can, put it together on the field and produce at the level that he's flashed. Brandon Dorlus, to me, is the name to watch. I think that's the guy who's got so much athleticism. He had great college, high pressure rates. Can he translate it at this level? Ollie's high on him. Ollie spoke very highly of him. I asked him about him, and he's, it's a guy who is athletic, has a track record rooted in pressure. He's a good penetrator. The one thing about his year last year, played in 2 games, was inactive for the rest of them, healthy scratch in all of them. Even when he wasn't playing, he had mentioned this to me last year around like week 5 or 6. He got significantly improved. Like it just, he treated it very seriously off, practice and all that stuff, to where he understood, okay, even if I'm not going to play, what can I add to my game? So he would spend a lot of time trying to add moves, whether it's on Yamada, Jarrett, the guys that he had around him last year, trying to pick parts of what they do so well and add it to his game. So he kind of had a redshirt year last year. And Atlanta's had Onyemata and Harrison and Rook as the 3 linemen, with Floyd and AK out wide when they initially began 11 on 11 on Monday. But you could see, that interior room, the pieces that they have, they are entirely expecting last year's class to take that leap. Rook and Brandon kind of control the keys in there. I asked Raheem about it Monday, about what the next step is there. He said for them, he's seen good progress so far. The big key for them is when the pads come on, can they keep it at this level? Can they keep growing? Can they step with the pads on? Because with pads off in meetings and all that, Raheem is very pleased with the strides that each of Rook and Brandon have made, and they're optimistic. So it's a cool room. It's youth and it's older guys, and it's a lot of guys you have Taquan Graham who's back. You've got a lot of guys who have played significant snaps in there. So it's kind of a cool room.
Yeah, and like I said, a lot of expectations, a lot of talent. And so it's more about just putting their talent on display and seeing it take that next step on the field and being what they want to become as a defense. And so obviously, this, one of those battles, the D-line can affect the secondary. And one of the big competitions that people are looking at is the nickel position. We heard Billy Bowman switching the nickel. Clark Phillips is in the running. D. Alford is back. He's been the starter the last couple of years. What have you heard anything on that? Just, I'm assuming Billy's not right now in that,
right?
But just so far, just about Clark, D, and just how those guys are coming along right now.
Yeah, with Bowman, the plan is still to keep him at in that slot corner role, but they're not really putting rookies in those spots yet. So when they took the field Monday, it was Alford who had that slot. Clark was the 2s. The interesting thing to monitor with that for me is Atlanta. Raheem, when I'd asked him at league meetings about Hughes, he said that because I expected him with the contract that Hughes received that he would 100% say, yeah, he'll be our starting corner outside. No, he said, you know what? I think we're going to try him in slot. And I'm like, okay. So that's kind of what they're trying to do. They had at least mentioned that as a part of the plan, is that Hughes can play inside if need be, which that might be where one opens it up and says, oh, if only there was a proven outside cornerback who wants, traded. But that's kind of where you would think that maybe that vision would come to life a little bit more, because Hughes was outside cornerback too. It was Terrell, Hughes, and Alford at corner for them. So, it's still early on in it and all of that. But I think it's interesting, and I do think Alford, for as much criticism as he received last year, the staff liked him. Highly competitive guy, well liked by the whole room around him. It'll be interesting to see how that kind of shakes out, because it feels like he got the job. He's got the job, but I would not say that that's a position that is at all set.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, a lot of people will look at last year, and we all kind of look at the Jimmy Lake defense, and maybe that hurt him because a lot of guys regressed last year under that defense. So maybe they're looking at he can go back to maybe what it was the year before that.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting too that even with Atlanta's schematic shift, the coaches who had Alford and Clark, the whole room are all back. Like it's not like their room got changed much at all. Justin Hood is back. You have Gray back. Like, you've got the lead dogs in that room who work with these guys throughout all of last year are back. So it's not like Alford has like the same head coach, but a whole new like surrounding cast and all that. Like, he has got the same pieces he had last year who know him, as much as I would love to say that I know everything, they know way more than all of us do. So that is one of those things where I think his familiarity with how he fits, how his coaches want him to play, kind of provides that early step up. But I think that you'll reach a time here, maybe even in camp next week, where you start to see them try to throw some other, options out there. And that's when you start to experiment more. And I think training camp, well, because that's when the pads come on, that's when it's highly competitive, and that's when you actually have to start putting guys out there in spots you actually want them to play once this becomes real.
Yeah, definitely. And so, listen, it'll be interesting to see how that battle kind of develops as camps goes on, and just seeing what the staff sees and what they like from those guys. Let's go back over to the offense. Obviously, one of the big stories on that side of the ball is the future of Kyle Pitts. A lot of rumors recently.
Yeah.
Some say that they don't really want to trade him, but they're open to offers, and it's a day 2 pick if they really want him. And then Pitts isn't really trying to get moved, but at the same time, he also understands where he is in the offense. Obviously they said he's been around, he's been in meetings, he's been in the building. It's not like he's been away. They're just being cautious with him. What is your take on just that entire situation since you've kind of been around the team?
Yeah, I think, pragmatically, trading Kyle Pitts makes very little sense for Atlanta. I'll go back to what Ulbrich had mentioned. Hang with me here. He had mentioned that when he looks at the roster, he expects, it was in response to a question about James Pierce Jr. And the trade up. And he had said, I don't expect that pick to be early. I think it'll be a late pick in 2026. That kind of, puts it into perspective what Atlanta's mindset and expectations are. Like, they think this will be a team that will reach the playoffs, that can win in the playoffs. You don't trade a guy. Like, if you're Atlanta, Kyle Pitts will probably be your number 3, number 4 guy, with catches, receiving yards, all that. Like, he will be a primary weapon in that offense. If you trade Kyle Pitts, your tight end position, I'm not sure where production's coming from. Charlie Warner had a career high catches last year. I think it was 7. Like, you look at the other guys in that room, Quatoriano from Houston, don't believe he caught a pass last year across 7 games. I think he made 4 starts. Like, I think Franks caught his very first NFL pass last year in Carolina. Like, the pieces on that roster, the only pass catching tight end Atlanta has in the event where it trades Kyle Pitts Joshua Simon, the undrafted rookie free agent, who had a tremendous last year at South Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. I believe he set a program record I think he was the very first tight end to lead the team in catches, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns in program history. So obviously, really good player. But if you're the Falcons and you expect to compete for a playoff spot, I'm not sure how you just entrust all of your tight end passing attack production to an undrafted rookie, especially now when he's only been, in Flowery Branch for a month. So trading Kyle Pitts, for as much as everyone can say he's not what he was expected, and all that, he hasn't met the heights that came with him being a top 5 draft pick and the highest drafted tight end ever. For all you can say about that, he's a solid NFL tight end. And when he's at his best and when he's on, he's a really, really good pro tight end. I mean, even last year he flashed it at Tampa Bay, had a tremendous, tremendous performance on National Tight Ends Day. There are still games where you can see the vision, see what he can still be when he puts it all together. It doesn't make sense if you're Atlanta. I really don't put a whole lot of stock into it. If a team calls you and asks, I'm sure you would listen just to hear him out. But I think if I'm Terry Fontenot, I would have to have, my socks knocked all the way from Flowery Branch to Atlanta on an afternoon with a whole lot of traffic in between, which is just a regular afternoon. Because I don't see a world where that improves your team in 2025. And this is a team that, I can point you to the 2 draft trades Atlanta made, is not exactly care about what's happening after 2025.
Yeah, and I think too, we've heard Penix come out this year, out during the offseason, and say he thinks he can work with Kyle and help Kyle, get back up, especially with his arm, because this is probably the most talented in terms of just arm talented quarterback he's had. Remember, he had Matt Ryan at the end of towards the end of his. Marcus Mariota, he's not known as this elite thrower of the football. Desmond Ridder, we went through the Desmond Ridder experience. Kirk coming off an Achilles, and so it was one of those things where I think they're hoping for that. I think Penix is hoping for that. I also say too with Pitts, I think the issue at the end of the day is that since he was a top 5 pick, people just will not let that expectation go. Even though we all recognize he's not the number 1 or number 2 option in the offense, they're going to still think he has to take the league by storm and 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, when that's maybe not in this offense what he's going to be.
Right. Yeah. And it's also if you look at alignment wise, he's a guy who you can put in a whole lot of spots as well. And that not only, even if he's not catching the passes, it's going to help the guys around him just for the presence that he provides. And, again, if you look at the room around him, who else is taking that spot? So then if you trade away Kyle Pitts, you're going to have, if you're Zach Robinson, you have to change a whole lot of what you were wanting to accomplish this year. So that's just a move that I think Albert Breer wrote this earlier today at SI, that it's kind of it's a topic that can only happen in early June. If you're just trying to find whatever to talk about, that's something where it's okay, contract year, hasn't produced at an incredible level, could it be? But no, Atlanta wants more out of Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts wants more out of Kyle Pitts. 2025 could be the last year to prove it, or at least on field and here. But we'll see. I don't think it happens. I don't think the trade happens, to clarify. I would be surprised. I think it's kind of a cordial thing if you get called on a guy to at least hear them out, but it doesn't make if you're Atlanta and you have expressed numerous times at the combine, league meetings, draft weekend, the whole 9 yards, that you want to win in 2025 and you're about trying to improve this team now to win in 2025. Because if you're Terry Fontenot, are you back if you lose again? He's already the first GM in team history to get a year 5 when he hasn't had a season over 500 yet. So it would be even more historic if he gets year 6 if they're not if they can't win in 2025. So if you're him, his job probably depends on Atlanta winning in 2025. Trading Kyle Pitts might net you a solid draft pick in 2026, probably not top 100. And they've already traded away a top 100, already traded away a top, top, I think it was round 1 and round 5 for 2026. They don't care about 2026 draft picks is what they've shown so far. Why would you start now? So I don't see it. I don't expect it to happen.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, and that's what I was saying. I was like, I don't know how likely, like I said, you know how it is. We in the offseason, rumor mills get started.
Yeah.
People want to talk. So, I think with Pitts always being a very controversial name and just football, just because of the expectations and draft picks, I think anytime there even is the inkling that there could be something, people are going to want to make it a bigger deal for sure. Yeah. Let's talk about Darnell Mooney. I think Ike Hilliard kind of mentioned him the other day, saying they're expecting more from him this year. Yeah. A guy who probably would have been 1,000-yard receiver if he didn't have the injury at the end of the year. Still, some people, I've talked to some people still don't believe in Darnell Mooney. They still think Darnell Mooney is an average receiver. He ain't him. Really? Like, there's some people I know that have been like, oh, and I sometimes also think some of this is fantasy. But, some people just are not sure. Is Darnell really him? And I'm like, I'm trying to tell y'all, elite route runner, can read 4-3, make big plays. And so if they're expecting more from him, what does that look like for Darnell Mooney? Is that a higher receptions? Is that more big plays? What is that looking like when they say we want more from Darnell Mooney?
That's a good question. I think run after catch opportunity is probably where that comes into play. He's interesting. Tremendous guy, athletic, fast, smooth, fluid. He's the full package. And that's kind of the thing with him is I think his last few years in a not too great Chicago offense kind of diminished his, view around the league, or at least, outside the league. But that's what Ike told me last year is like they wanted to, like, Atlanta wanted Mooney to remind people of who he is and how good he is. They accomplished that last year. If you look back at the year he had in Chicago in 2021, I believe it was, when he had like 1,100 yards, had like over 100 targets, I think. That's probably more of what it looks like. I wouldn't want to put, he'll have X amount of targets or whatever, but I think you look at it with Penix being a guy who is more than comfortable throwing the ball downfield. I think with Mooney, the two ways that he's more involved, one, it'll be opening it up deep, and two, it'll be probably trying to involve him more in spots where he can, catch it and run. So, but no, I mean, he's Mooney, man. I mean, he is exactly what you'd expect from him.
Yeah, listen, I'd be at work watching Falcons games on Sunday, and sometimes every time he scores, I'll be like, bring me my Mooney. So,
yeah,
it's definitely a guy who I think a lot of people feel like this is kind of like the Mohamed Sanu situation. You guys sign a guy, good, solid deal, and he ends up producing higher than maybe what the contract is worth. And that just ends up being great for the offense overall. So big things coming from him. And obviously we know what Drake London and those guys can do for sure. I do have a quick question just back on the receiving core. Obviously Ray Ray's wide receiver 3. Some people have made mention just like, could his job be up for, is he like firmly wide receiver 3, like for sure? Have you heard anything about that? Is it like it's Ray Ray? It's like it's gonna be Ray Ray, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean he was the slot on Monday as well. I mean he's the one thing about him. Atlanta loves him. Like people don't fully grasp that. I think is like I actually wrote something on this as like a inside his like career year in January, just because I was trying to get people to understand that like. His value, who he is as a player, Atlanta doesn't look at the name and think of what everybody else would think when they see his name. Like you can get yourself into a very bad box or just a habit of pinning someone to what they've been. Atlanta does not see that in him. Like Ray, Atlanta like changed its offensive personnel tendencies last year. Zach Robinson literally like said that last year that like they went into the year probably trying to run more 12 personnel than what they actually did. And with Ray, I think he had like 4 for 53 or I don't know. It was a good performance. So against Pittsburgh opening the year. And Zach said that, like, you start watching him more and more and more, and you're like, this guy's too good to take off the field. So if you're Atlanta and, you know, the only, like, real receiver room change that you had, lost Rondale Moore, and then, you know, you signed Nash after the draft. The room, I think the pecking order there is pretty well clear. It'll go London, Mooney, McLeod, Hodge, and then after that, you know, it's up for grabs. Washington, Nash, a lot of guys in there. Drummond's looked pretty good. Like, there's some – it's interesting. I think it'll be interesting, but I don't think there's any controversy inside that team, you know, around that team for the coaches there, the players there, about McLeod, because he is a very, very valued piece. Very, very valued piece to them in that offense.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, a guy who they obviously wanted, a very speedy guy, kind of in that slot position, which is why I also got Rondale to begin with as well. How sadly, you know, the injury, you know, kept him out and they moved on.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think that they feel like, okay, we found something here. We found a guy who's more than special teams, and they're just going to want to continue to try to build on that this season within the offense. Like I said, it'll be interesting with them expanding the offense, how that impacts certain players. What does that mean for certain guys, and how that could obviously make it to the level where they are the best offense in the league, which is a goal that they have. So,
yeah. And, you know, I think they have the talent to be – they have the chemistry. They have the quarterback talent. They have all you need to be a really, really productive offense, in my opinion.
Yes, sir, man. All the ingredients are in the kitchen. Now you just got to cook it up. But
for sure.
I appreciate you, Daniel, coming on to the show man. Let people know where they can find you.
Oh, si.com/NFL/Falcons. Always a great bet. Twitter @by and then my name. That's about it. I think we're on Facebook, Atlanta Falcons on SI, if I'm not mistaken. I don't run that part of it. I let other people run that. Shout out to Scott Kennedy. But yeah, dude, Bryce, as always, appreciate you having me on, man. Always glad to hop on and chop it up with you. And hopefully we can extend our streak to 4 in 26.
Hey, man, I'm hopeful for that too, man. Obviously, like we talked before, I'm hoping to be at camp for second year this year for a couple of days and get out there so I can see the team up close and personal. So obviously it's always a fun time to obviously be able to do that and see everybody who works so hard to cover this team. And because we have some great people, content creators, local news, you know, guys who create their own brands to be able to cover the team. Obviously you from SI writing, just great work from you all the time, man. And
appreciate you.
We just gotta keep going out there grinding, man. But yeah, guys. So obviously, y'all know where to find me, Bryce_2K on Twitter. If y'all enjoyed this episode, for sure, subscribe, like, leave a comment, you know, everything like that. Definitely go follow Daniel if y'all have any questions for him. I'm sure he can spread his wisdom with y'all too. Yeah, so we'll have to see what happens as we continue to move forward as the Falcons get into minicamp next week, and we'll continue to see and track what happens with the team. But that's Daniel. I'm Bryce. See you next time.